Unanimous. Thank you. Okay, now we're at item 6B, which is, thank you, Dominic, by the way. Thank you. 6B, which is the Heritage Permit Application 1907 for number 39 Central Street. And this report was prepared by Frederick Van Rooyen, who's coming up now. And while you get settled, I'll just ask Council if you have questions for staff on this at all. No questions. Would anyone like to move the motion before us? Okay, we've got Councillor Freeman, seconded by Councillor Bodley. I shall call the vote. Everyone in favour? That is everyone. Okay, thank you. We're getting there. Next is item 6C, which is again, it's all uptown tonight. Sorry, everyone, from other wards. This is the listing of non-designated properties on the Municipal Heritage Register in the Mary Allen neighbourhood area. And this report again is Frederick Van Rooyen, who is again here to answer any questions of council. So are there any questions from council on this matter? Yeah, Councillor Freeman?
The only question was, is any of the property owners contrary-minded to this listing?
Through your chair, Bongor, we actually did originally have 12 properties, and so now we are down to 11 as one of the property owners did not want to proceed with the listing. But I will mention that the whole intent and reason why we're here is because it's really an extension of the temporary heritage sign program that was quite successful last year. And so we expanded it to this year, and additional property owners requested the signs and the listing.
Any other questions from council? Okay, we have had a request for a delegation, so I'd like to invite Margrel to come before us. If you'd just like to come up to the podium, it will be all ready for you. Councillor Freeman. Councillor Vasic is seconding. Now I can call the vote. Everyone in favour of the motion before us? That's everyone. Thank you. Okay. Now we get to the formal and informal public meetings section of the meeting. So first up is an informal public meeting to consider item 7A, and this is the zoning bylaw amendment Z1904 2616359 Ontario Inc. relating to the property 262 to 280 Albert Street. There will be no decision made on this matter tonight. Council and the public are seeing this application for the first time, and Council is looking for feedback from interested parties with respect to this application. So tonight's comments will be taken into consideration in developing a staff position on this application, and a staff report will be considered by Council during a formal public meeting at a future date. All property owners within 120 metres of the subject lands, and anyone who signs the registry, which is on the desk at the back of the council chamber, will receive notice of that formal public meeting. Anybody who wants further notice of this application, including the formal public meeting and passage of any bylaw, should sign the appropriate registry located on the desk. And you'll note there is more than one registry there tonight, so please make sure you're signing the appropriate one. So we have our planner, Dominic Simpson, with us, who will now provide a brief overview of the application. Thanks, Dominic.
Bill Mixed Use 6. And under the city's new zoning bylaw 2018-050, it's holding residential Northdale 6. These, as you're aware, the new zoning bylaw is still under appeal with the local planning appeal tribunal. So the applicant is, well, we're reviewing the application based on both zoning bylaws, and the more restrictive of the two zoning bylaws in terms of the regulations would take precedent. Generally, the regulations between the two are pretty much the same. They just vary between setbacks in some instances, or the amenity space. And just for a high level, because I know the applicant will be presenting right after, in terms of the development proposal, it's a 6-story residential apartment building. The proposed density is 573 bedrooms per hectare, which will result in 190 units and 225 bedrooms. The applicant is also proposing 84 parking spaces underground. The applicant is also proposing a number of mezzanines in the one bedroom units on the ground floor. So this would incorporate loft space for these bedrooms. And again, the applicant can talk to this in a bit more detail if you have any questions regarding that. And also just a brief look at some of the renderings for the building. The one at the top, you can see it's the west elevation, which will be fronting onto Albert Street. North elevation there at the left corner, facing Hickory Street, and then the south elevation. Now, in terms of the actual amendments that the applicant is proposing, it would be an increase in density from 250 bedrooms per hectare to 573 bedrooms per hectare, which is within the official plan maximum of 600 bedrooms per hectare. They're also proposing a side yard reduction in the south portion of the site. They're proposing a architectural reduction in the rear of the building, which would incorporate balconies. And they're proposing to increase the number of driveways on the lot from 1 to 2. But I also want to make a note that all of these amendments are subject to change as per staff's review and when we circulate the application, as well as changes that might come through the site plan process. Next, they're also proposing to put the 4th, 5th, and 6th floors of the building into the daylight triangle at the corner of Albert and Hickory. Generally, these daylight triangles are setbacks that are established in the zoning bylaw so that there's appropriate sight lines at the intersection. So the 1st and 3rd floors will still be within that daylight triangle. And then lastly, which is something just common of a lot of the Northdale neighborhood, is to lift the holding symbol. And to do that, the applicant will have to satisfy or demonstrate that there's sufficient servicing capacity and transportation capacity on site. Whether the development conforms with the city's official plan and regional official plan, as well as the urban design manual and our Northdale urban design guidelines. And lastly, complete a Section 737 bonusing agreement. Now, as some of you might be aware, that Bill 108 was passed last week, which would have implications to the city's bonusing framework. So staff will be reviewing that and its implications to the applicant's proposal moving forward and taking the best direction with that. Next, just with the submitted documents and studies with the application, I don't need to go into this into detail. Majority of it's a standard package, servicing report, noise study, urban design rationale, site plan, transportation impact studies, etc. And lastly, for next steps, staff will be reviewing all of this content, all the submitted documents, the requested amendments, and the proposal as a whole, such as the building height, the parking, etc. We also welcome any feedback from the public during this process, and we are currently circulating the application with internal and external agencies during the month of June. And lastly, we would be taking all of this consideration and coming back to council at a formal public meeting at a later date. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Now, does any councillor have questions for staff? Just please remember this is an informal public meeting and only questions of clarification are to be asked. Yes, Councillor Henry.
Thank you, Chair Bonner, and thank you, Dominic, for presenting tonight. A couple of questions, and then I'll have a few for the applicant. First, on Bill 108, as noted, if the clock expires, and I understand from my own reading that the date that the act is proclaimed is the date that we would need to have any Section 37 agreements signed and approved for them to remain in effect. What would be necessary for an application at this scale at this level of density? What would be required for it to still be considered by the city if Section 37 was not available?
conjunction with this zone change application. So the amendment would have to be, or the existing application would have to be amended to include an official plan amendment to propose the additional density.
I think that's helpful context just as we begin this process. So on the specific development itself, Dominic or others, I'm wondering how common a building overhang into the daylight triangle is in the city of Waterloo. Is this a common request? Is this a highly unusual request?
Through you, Chair Bonagor, it's a request, and we'll evaluate what the results of that will be, and we'll consider other examples that may exist in the city. I can't think of any off the top of my head, but I'm sure it's not the first time this has been requested, but we'll do a full evaluation as we move forward.
It just sort of struck me as an unusual piece I hadn't seen before, so I was curious about that. I note as well in the list that you've got that they're asking for 2 driveways rather than 1. My glance at the site plan would suggest the 2 driveways really appear to be a double wide driveway rather than 2 distinct driveways in terms of how they're impacting the street. So I trust that that's something that staff are looking into as far as the requested appropriateness on our Green Street. I'll leave it there because I think the other ones are best answered by the applicant.
Do we have, yes, Mayor Jaworski.
Continuing on Councillor Henry's questioning on density through the chair. On the, if you go back in your slides and just refresh my memory of what's the increased density that they're asking for, I think it was on your earliest slides. So yeah, how many units are?
The proposed density is 573 bedrooms per hectare, and that would be 225 beds.
Okay, so it's so 20
that are jumping out of mind. Yeah, John, if you have anything to add.
Through you, Chair, it's the same response. It's a separate application, separate site consideration, but details such as topography changes across the site will be 2 factors that are similar between these developments, but we handled differently. Mezzanines and how those work, or something similar proposed, but different at the same time. And so there's certain similarities, but also a lot of differences between these 2 properties that I think they're still standalone discussions.
Okay, rest of council, any questions? I have one. It may not fall under your auspices at all, gentlemen, but given the amount of density in that neighbourhood and on that street that's proposed in particular, can I get some insight into any thinking in terms of traffic management or changes to the road structures that might be implemented to deal with this increased density?
Definitely. Through you, Chair Bonagor. As part of the application, a transportation impact study is submitted that, to my knowledge,